here. I'm here with Jarrod Walker, and he's running for Court of Appeals, 9th District. It's Wednesday, December 18th, 2019. With me is Larry Rogers, Bob Bagley, Dale Fessenden, and David Smith. And Jarrod, as we talked about, thanks again for coming in. You're welcome to take up to 5 minutes in an opening statement, and then we'll just go around the table with Q&A and then wrap it up after that.
Great, well, right back at you. Thanks for having me. I'll start by giving you my background. I grew up in Pinehurst, which is about 10 miles that way, wide spot in the road, and a lot of people, even though they live here, never heard of it. But I grew up there. I got my undergraduate degree in political science and Russian studies at Texas Tech. That is, at least the Russian part has failed to be a useful thing professionally. But after that, I went directly to law school at Ole Miss. And in my last semester at law school, they had a program at Ole Miss where you could, they called it an externship program, where if you were working for a government entity or a nonprofit, that you would get credit for your final hours. Well, this is 1993. This is pre-internet days, so I got on the phone and started hustling, trying to find somewhere. Ended up talking to now Judge Kathleen Hamilton. Back then, she was the incoming first assistant district attorney. There was a change in regimes that year, and so she asked me when I could be there and what my salary demands were, and I said Monday, and you can't pay me. So they brought me in. A lot different world back then. There was, I think the DA's office consisted of a grand total of 10 lawyers back then. It's approximately 50 now. So of course it's grown a lot. After that ended and passing the bar, I decided, hey, I'll just hang out my shingle here and see where it goes. And that was 26 years ago, and here I am. During the course of my career, let's talk about professional things. I will tell you, I'm approximating it at 200 jury trials. In addition to that, since we are talking about a court of appeals, I've got approximately, once again, 60 plus appeals. That includes 8 of the 14 appellate court jurisdictions in the state of Texas, as well as several before the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. And I don't know if any of the other folks you've talked to have explained that. The Court of Criminal Appeals is the highest level to hear criminal appeals. Professional achievements, I've served on the board of directors for the Texas Criminal Defense Lawyers Association. I've been a board member of the Montgomery County Bar Association, and I've also served as president of the Montgomery County Criminal Defense Lawyers Association. Currently, I serve as president of the Montgomery County Drug Court Assistance Program, and I also serve as legal counsel for the Montgomery County Mental Health Court. And if we need to flesh those things out, I'll certainly do that.
It's just about both now or in Costa Rica.
I was looking at the clock here, so let me speed through it as far as talking specifically about the court. During the course of my practice, I've practiced in pretty much every area you can name. I've done civil, I've done probate, I've done real estate, I've done mostly criminal law. That's the main focus of my practice. The other thing is, 51 seconds I'm going to tell you, when we're dealing with the Ninth Court of Appeals, once again, I think professional experience is the most important thing that you can consider here, because as far as my opponents goes, it ranges from 0 appeals, and I believe others have had a handful. But my courtroom experience and my appellate experience, I don't think they match up to me on that. The things that I would like to accomplish in the court, to say it as briefly as I can, I think the most important thing we can do is stay the course. Chief Justice McKeithen is retiring, and when I started practicing, the state 9th district, judicial district, was the same as the 9th in the federal system. It was the liberal getting reversed every time something got up to Austin. And it was switching from Democratic to Republican when Justice McKeithen came in. And he righted the ship. They've gone from the most overturned to the least overturned during that time. And I think it's not on, but I'm probably out of my 5 minutes, so I'll defer back to y'all for questions.
All right, thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, so you've had over 200 jury trials, 60 plus appeals. How much of your experience has been civil, and how much is the appellate court split into criminal and civil?
Specifically, as far as the breakdown of the Court of Appeals, I would say the majority, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but the majority is criminal. You asked about my civil experience. I always had a joke that I always keep 2 or 3 in my file cabinet to make myself miserable. But at one point in my career, our firm had we represented a trucking company that, of course, in South Texas, they get sued constantly. So we had the region south of I-10 all the way to the border, and we represented them anytime they got in any type of litigations. And it was pretty much almost exclusively personal injury defense. So that was, for about a 5-year period, that's about all I did. And did I get all the points you brought up?
Sure. Well, yeah, you said the majority is criminal at the appellate court, and then you've had some
Right.
civil.
And you don't have a choice of picking and choosing in the Court of Appeals. You're going to, you take them all.
Right.
What was your percentage of civil, though?
My personal,
Right.
or if you ask me in turn, it's varied over the years.
Right.
Right now, I would say it probably runs 80-20, 80 being the criminal.
For you personally?
Correct.
Okay.
And like I said, those percentages have varied over the years, but I would say that's a good ballpark figure as far as currently.
Okay, and where's your practice now?
In Conroe.
In Conroe. And you've been here for 26 years, maybe. Are you with a farm, your own farm, or is it?
No, I'm a solo practitioner now, and I plan on staying. I hope to be the Chief Justice of the 9th Court of Appeals, but I plan on staying in as a solo practitioner. I've been in a firm that varied from as low as 3 and as high as 5 lawyers, and we ended that, I'm going to say, probably 3-4 years ago.
Okay, Bob, go ahead.
Montgomery County, we've had an issue with judges not necessarily showing up for work.
Right.
Mondays, the courthouses are empty. Fridays, the courthouses are empty.
It's a ghost town on Friday.
Right, and I've heard this from lawyers throughout the years. Your court or the ninth court is totally different, and that I don't think you have to be there every moment, because there's a lot of reading and research that you have to do, that wouldn't necessarily mean that you had to be there in court. So you could possibly operate from home, work from home, or work in the office. Do you know what your staff is, and how many hours are you willing to work?
Working for myself for all these years, if I don't work, I don't eat. So the answer as far as number of hours, however many hours it takes. When you talk about specifically about the Court of Appeals, you're correct. That job, as long as you got a laptop and access to the internet, you can do the job. But as far as you mentioned the staff, I spoke with Justice McKeithen a few weeks ago, and of course, as far as the internal workings of the court, as far as staff goes, I have very little knowledge, and I don't think any of my opponents would know that either, but it's something that we're going to have a transition period between, because there is no Democratic opponent. Once this election is decided, you've got till January 1st of 21, and I think it's crucial, especially in the Chief Justice position, is you got to be prepared for that you got to have a transition period, and you got to work with the justices there now, specifically Chief Justice McKeithen, and we'll have time to do that. Analyze what needs to change, what needs to, because there's a new boss coming in, and that's going to be a big change for the entire court. It's they've been kind of going along the same course for 18 years, so is what I would as far as what I would do with staff, are they overstaffed, are they understaffed? I honestly don't know.
Do you know what the total staffing is right now?
As far as actual numbers, no, but I would ballpark it at about, taking out the 4 justices, you're talking probably about 10.
Overall for the entire court?
Correct. And I also understand that there's potential that the clerk of the court will be retiring at the same time, so that's even you didn't hear me say it, but that's probably bigger than the Chief Justice. She's been there for a while. She runs the show there.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
kind of heard that, I think.
Well, not in quite the same context.
No.
Anyway,
No.
regarding indigent defense, you had kind of interesting response to that question. And these opened a whole bunch of other questions like, well, what should the criteria be? Because you obviously have some issues with current criteria. How much money and from what sources should that money come? And who calls the shots on how much money is appropriate?
The criteria as far as for the lawyers,
Well, whether a defendant is qualified for indigent defense or not.
okay, yes, okay. This has been a obsession of mine for 26 years now, so we'll be here all night talking about indigent defense.
You got 2 minutes.
I'll start with, first of all, is the criteria for defendants. We don't look closely enough at whether they are truly indigent. I think we all understand that Gideon versus Wainwright decided in the 60s that an indigent defendant is entitled to counsel. There's no doubt about that. That's well-settled law. In addition to that, we have a private citizen with the whole heft of the state of Texas coming down on them, and they need and deserve that counsel as citizens. But it's varied over time, but sometimes it's merely to ask. They just say, You want a court-appointed lawyer? Sure, here you go. My personal belief is if you can make a bail bond, you can go work and hire a lawyer. But that's not the way it works. There's criteria, they interview them and put it in some matrix as far as poverty standards. But at the end of the day, when I look at a file and I see somebody has made a $50,000 bond, in other words, somehow they came up with $5,000 cash money, they can go get their own lawyer. That needs to be tightened up. I know that McLennan County specifically hired an investigator. Go out, what kind of cars in the driveway, where are they living, etc. And it was amazing how much their numbers went down as far as appointed. I'm running out of time, but as far as the money, where does it come from? It's the county's general fund. And if you want to wheel back to this later, I can tell you they changed the system dramatically about 2 years ago. And certainly there's problems, but it is 100 times better than it used to be,
Okay.
at least locally.
David?
Visiting judges, you hear the slang rule and run. And, we've had a case with the Texas Open Meetings Act. We got a visiting judge for that. And then the governor, he tried to use his constitutional powers of veto. And he got convicted, turned up appeals by a visiting judge. So do we have a problem with visiting judges being handed off, difficult cases?
I'll start by telling you as far as it's not as bad as it used to be. There's 2 points contained within your question. One is the fiscal aspect of visiting judge, and the second point is should we have visiting judges. As far as once again, I bring good news on this. Several years ago, the state came down and said, y'all are out of hand. It was, I would see visiting judges more than I would see the actual judge. And the budget, there wasn't a budget. It was whatever y'all wanted to do. And so the state came in and tightened that up. And it is rare on a just general day-to-day docket thing to see visiting judges anymore. And that's good. We're paying them, we elected them and we're paying them, so they should be there. But the propriety of appointing visiting judges in cases like the one you mentioned, I think it's sometimes you see people being chicken politically. They do that simply because they don't want to fade the heat, or somebody's going to get mad about this. And I've had that happen to myself a few times over the years, and it's you got elected to a job, you need to show more courage and do that job, because just because you may know the litigants, that doesn't necessarily mean you're precluded from hearing the case. But once again, it's a lack of courage is what leads to that.
On one of the questions, do you think judges should be elected by the people or appointed by a commission? You said elected, however, as mentioned earlier, in our questionnaire, you said you worry about the uninformed voter, and we have kind of that same concern too.
Yep.
As well. You said you've seen some unbelievably bad choices made over the years, and definitely we have. That's why we do what we do. And you said you'd be in favor of establishing some higher standards in order to stand for judicial election. Can you elaborate on that and what you think the difference between judicial elections are and any other political election that's out there?
Well, it's the further you get down the ballot, the worse it gets. And as we agree, that we've had some crazy choices over the years. And when you, as I go through this campaign and people bring up issues like, well, it's a good ballot name, or, oh, what's your position on the ballot? And I go, is that really the way it works? And you know, that's sad. And I'm preaching to the choir here because you're informed and you're trying to inform others. But as far as what we can do, as far as higher standards, you know, for this position, 10 years and a pulse is and $1,800 or $1,850 or whatever the filing fee is. That's the extent of the qualifications. I think extending the number of years of active practice, not holding the bar card, but active practice, and a certain amount of litigation experience, such as appeals, jury trials. There's several things you can do in that regard. And I also mentioned in my answer that maybe there's some sort of vetting that can be done. I don't know if y'all are familiar with what's called the Missouri Plan. They tried to address this issue, and what they do is you gotta pass allegedly nonpartisan panel before you get the okay to run. It certainly adds a layer of bureaucracy, but I'm rarely in favor of. But there's, once again, I just seen so many silly results over the years, and it's just, there's got to be a better way to do it. And I'm out of time. Perfect.
Yeah, no offense to Mr. Walker, Scott Walker, but we never got a chance to interview the guy, never replied to any of our emails. He had no Facebook presence that we know of, and he's run for Court of Criminal Appeals,
Oh.
I believe it was.
Mm-hmm.
And he won going away, and it's like, seriously?
My favorite was this is several years ago, in this Court of Criminal Appeals, there was a guy with the last name Crockett, and his first name was James, or something like that.
Had to be
And
a
so he,
descendant, right?
well, when he filled out his application, he puts James Davy Crockett. And they went to, for some reason I remember this so well, he was from Tyler, and they went and interviewed his associates, some people he worked with, and nobody calls him Davy. You know, but that's, once again, the type of things you see.
Yep.
Okay, a while ago, did you say that District 9 Appeal Court is about 70% criminal and
That's a good ballpark.
30% civil? So you've had your practice here for 26 years, and this court is actually in Beaumont.
Right.
How are you handling it?
Handle as far as the travel.
Mhm.
The wife and I have spoken about what are we going to do if this goes the way we plan on it going. You have 4 justices right now. 2 of them live in Jefferson County. 2 of them live here in Montgomery County, Chief Justice McKeith and Justice Greger. And it can be done. They have a satellite office here in Conroe. And as mentioned earlier, a laptop and internet service, and you're good to go. Your physical presence is necessary specifically for oral arguments, which is fairly common, and we can get into that later. But whether I would move over there, I would probably doubt it. My son's a freshman in high school in Montgomery, and I think we would probably at least hang out till he graduates.
And so you obviously would have to give up your practice.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Bob?
We have a lot of things in Montgomery County that we can be thankful for, or not. one of those not is our problems with our civil asset forfeitures. We don't seem to have a due process, and people have things taken away before they're convicted and don't get them back. This could be a case that could come to you, but I would just like to know what your feeling is on civil asset forfeitures and due process.
I've lived it. I have several cases sitting in the file cabinet right now. And once we finish off the indigent defense topic for 20 hours, I can go on much longer on forfeitures. And it is it's a big topic. It's getting national attention, and we're things are trending the right way, in my opinion. You're probably familiar with Tim's decision that came down approximately a year ago from the U.S. Supreme Court. And the basic premise of that is that if a guy has $10 worth of dope in his pocket, you're not going to take his mama's house. I use that as a ridiculous extreme, but not too ridiculous.
No, it's happened here.
Nah. The biggest problem with asset forfeiture is I think the state wants you to believe that we're going and getting $1 million cash from some big drug dealer. It's nickel and dime stuff. I've seen as low as $500. And the unequal power structure of the state, first of all, let's say they take $5,000 from you and you go try to hire somebody like me to get your money back, and I tell you it's going to cost $10,000 to get your money back. What are you going to do? You're going to let the $5,000 go. And they count on that. And by they I mean the government.
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest changes that needs to be made is where does the money go? I mentioned in my questionnaire, I'm sure you're all familiar with the good old Montgomery County making national news over our margarita machine that was bought with asset forfeiture funds. But the best way to solve that problem is take the profit motive out of it. Profit motive in the criminal justice system does not work. If the DA, the local sheriff, the local police chief, hey, everybody gets to dip their beak and everybody gets something new, some new piece of equipment, or God forbid a margarita machine. There's an incentive to go after that. And plus, it's used to lean on people in their plea bargain process. It's supposed to be separate, and it may be implied, but it's there. That the two things are intertwined. So, once again, you got a fellow traveler on the issue of asset forfeiture. If we're going to do it, the funds need to go directly to the general fund of the state, so that nobody's thinking, hey, we can, use this for equipment, specifically for equipment.
Thank you.
Just to follow up on that, just for a brief answer, would the legislature have to be the ones to enact that?
Yeah, Chapter 59, what it generally says right now is if the money's supposed to go directly to the state. However, if you have a local agreement, in other words, if the various law enforcement organizations and the district attorney get together and they say, here's how we're divvying up the pie, you can do it that way. I'm not running for the legislature, but if I was, that would be the first thing I would do, is take out that
However clause.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, so can I continue on with that since we're doing this? You said you would do that if you were in the legislature. We know you're not going to legislate from the bench.
Correct.
But would you be willing to put a bill together for the legislature to get it submitted for them to pass this or any other type of bill that you saw as a social injustice that was taking place?
Once I have the heft of the title behind my name, I think I might get listened to a little bit more. And so, as far as speaking with, specifically, I mentioned Will Metcalf or Brandon Creighton. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, marching off on a slightly different tack. Have you ever run for any kind of elective office before?
I did for 5 minutes back, I'm going to say, I can't remember what year that was. It was the year they created the 435th District Court.
Okay.
And I signed up, and the very next week, my mother-in-law tragically died. And in talking to my wife about it, it was just like, we can't do this. We've got other things. I was more concerned about her well-being and campaigns. I'm sure y'all are aware. It's arduous. And so I didn't feel up to the task, and so I just, once again, I signed up, but I withdrew early December.
So you mentioned the 435th. The 457th is open now. Why did you choose the 9th versus the 457th to run for?
I don't want to be a district court judge. I want to be an appellate judge. It's two very different jobs. So much of my practice, and I think for most lawyers, it's when you're hustling around the courthouse. There's days I will walk in the office, my secretary will throw me a stack of files, and I don't get back till 5 o'clock. There's no time to think, to research, to write. These things appeal to me, and from a personal perspective, that's why I want the job.
Okay.
I enjoy that.
Fair enough. David?
You know, District Attorney has stood up in Commissioner's Court and talked about the 50 to 60% increase in felony filing in the last 5 years.
Mhm.
And, you know, recently the court ran out of money for public defender's office. You know, it seems like we have a crime wave sweeping the county. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a function of numbers. As the population continues to increase, you're going to have more of that criminal element. The DA's office, there's no control over how they, how many cases and what they choose to focus their attention on. I can't really comment as far as the internal workings of their office. Certainly I deal with the consequences of that. But you did mention something I can comment on is back to the indigent defense question. You mentioned the shortfall that happened recently, and some insight on that, because the courts are duty bound for those truly indigent people to pay those funds. And we rarely see, as the DA's budget increases, you would think that the defense budget is going to have to, unfortunately, is going to have to increase at the same rate. But once again, back to the budget shortfall. At the beginning of the fiscal year, the amount for defense is fairly well set. Within a small range, they can predict that. But when the Office of Court Administration went to the commissioners and said, we need X number of dollars for indigent defense, I don't know how or where, but the decision was made, okay, we're going to cut that by $400,000. Just, I think that was just creative budgeting, just we're going to make the numbers work. So they cut it by $400,000. Lo and behold, they got to the end of the fiscal year, and what? We're $400,000 short. And it got fixed fairly quickly, but I think the shortfall that you saw, and that was this just ended fiscal year. That was a function of poor budgeting.
All righty.
I'll pass. Bob?
Wasn't expecting to come this way.
We got all the way back around. Let's talk about forfeiture.
Just want to let me have it, come back to
Yeah, go ahead.
you. Okay. 10th Amendment, let's pose a hypothetical situation. Case goes to a district court. They wind up with a jury nullification type verdict. It gets appealed to the ninth. How are you going to handle that? How are you going to view that? What are the important elements in that situation?
I'll answer the question, but I'll tell you that that scenario could never happen. Because if we have a jury nullification, the person is acquitted, the state has no right of appeal, it's over. But when we talk about nullification, people, the current state of case law does not allow me to argue for nullification in front of the jury. That's an objectable point that any good prosecutor's going to catch. If I stand up there and say, hey, let's, burglary's no big deal, why don't you just let him go because nobody cares about burglary. That's an improper argument. But nullification is not something that typically happens in the courtroom. It happens back in the jury room, and it happens. And there is no methodology to, the court can instruct the jury, but is 6 or 12 good citizens, they're going to make their decision, and it's one area that this is coming up right now is marijuana. Generally speaking, the public's attitudes are changing, and it varies from state to state and county to county as far as the attitude towards it. But we're seeing nullification, and it's not because the defense attorney or the judge say, "Hey, nobody cares about marijuana anymore, so go ahead and nullify it." That's certainly what that jury is doing back there. I've seen it several times where it's, if you go by the letter of the law, it was a dead bang guilty verdict, but the jury nullified it. So as far as the specific issue of nullification, I just really can't see that coming before the Court of Appeals. It's just something that organically happens back in the jury.
So have you encountered any nullification cases have you worked on cases that have had that verdict?
You'll see it in assault cases where with the verdict, the jury is saying the person who was assaulted had it coming. You'll see it, as I said, in some drug cases. So it happens.
You've experienced it, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
You know, I was listening to some of the judges talk at Commissioners Court, and they mentioned, people get jury duty, they get summons, and the show-up rates in the mid-teens.
I got one just the
Just
other day.
Do we have a problem brewing where people don't want to serve
Appearance rates for jury service, I would have to talk to Ms. Miller about that as far as I don't really know what their numbers are. I would say typically we have panels show up. It's most of your felony cases, about 75 people. Don't quote me on this, but I think they have to summon about 3 times that many in order to get a panel. It's unfortunate. It's shirking your civic duty, but it happens. And yes, do we have a problem? My ultimate answer is yes, we do. It's not arduous or difficult. Some people, it's an economic hardship, and oftentimes those people are allowed to leave. but show up.
So the Supreme Court has ability to pick and choose what cases it wants to hear and not hear. And sometimes that's dependent upon how well the attorney presents his written case.
Talking state or fed?
State.
Okay.
Does your court, does the Ninth Court of Appeals get to do that?
No, as long as you perfect your appeal, which in criminal cases means filing a two-page document. And in civil cases, sometimes there's a bond requirement, but you get on, you're properly filed, you're gonna get heard.
Okay, so you have to see or hear every case that comes in
Correct.
if they're prepared properly.
You have a right to what we call a direct appeal to the Court of Appeals. And like you said, from there, Texas Court of Criminal Appeals for criminal cases, Texas Supreme Court for civil cases, they do get to pick and choose.
Okay.
Do you have any idea how many cases a year the Ninth hears?
As far as an exact number, no, I don't. We're dealing with the 10-county area in Montgomery County. By my numbers, about 2/3 of it. But that brings up a very good point. I don't know if anybody else or besides Scott, who else y'all have spoken to. The docket equalization order, is that phrase been thrown around? Okay. This is a biggie. We have 14 courts of appeals in the state, and it's all over geographically. Does anybody know where Eastland, Texas is? Okay, you're the one. A wide spot in the road between Fort Worth and Abilene on I-20. And they have a court of appeals. I don't know historically when that happened or how that happened or why they were chosen. But some courts have as many as 8 justices, some have a minimum of 3. Beaumont has 4. I say Beaumont, the Ninth Court of Appeals. We always refer to it as Beaumont. And of course, populations change, people move, and it's almost like a congressional districting. Now we've got a Court of Appeals down in South Texas that's got more than they can say grace over, and then we have Eastland with 3 cases pending. And I exaggerate those numbers. The solution that was come up with was the Supreme Court, the Texas Supreme Court, issued a docket equalization order. And what this says is some bureaucrat in Austin crunches the numbers. Beaumont has this many, Corpus has this many, Houston has this many. And they say, okay, Beaumont, you have too many cases, send your next 5 cases to San Antonio. And El Paso, you have too many, so you send 4 cases to Waco. It's wrong. We elect our justices for our district to hear our cases. I didn't vote for some justice down in Corpus Christi to hear my case, or anywhere else in the state. And it goes the other way. The judges in Corpus, or the citizens down there, did not elect the justices here in the 9th District. It is a problem. The solution, and it's a long-term solution, is moving around justice positions and moving around the geographic regions. Like I said, this is 10 counties. There's some out like Midland, I think, has something ridiculous like 50 counties. But that's going to be painful. That's going to take legislative action, constitutional amendments, but it's something, it's time to do it. I think it's unfair to the litigants that voted for specific justices to hear their case, and it's all over the map. Trust me, you're going to get a lot different ruling out of El Paso than you are the 9th Court of Appeals. and it's difficult for the lawyers as well. That needs to change, and once again, that's not, next week, let's sign a piece of paper and do it. That's a years and dealing with the legislature, but it's something that needs to happen. The 9th was way overloaded and has been way overloaded for, I'm gonna say, gosh, probably the past 10 years. I spoke with Chief Justice McKeithen the other day, and he said for the first time since he's been there in his 18 years, Beaumont actually, the Ninth Court of Appeals, actually sent cases out. I'm sorry, took cases in under the docket equalization versus having to send them out. And that's to the credit of the justices in the sense that apparently they're being a little too efficient. So they're not sending out a lot of cases, but they've come from gone from sending cases out to bringing them in. But the point remains, it's that problem needs to be fixed.
All right, so we've hit our time limit. If you'd like to take up to 5 minutes and your closing argument set, feel free to, and then we'll wrap it up.
Thank you. I'll finish up what was left of my opening here. And I had a list of things that why I think I'm the best for this job. And that is I practice in every area. These justices do not get to pick. I only want to hear the criminal. I don't want to hear the civil. I only want to hear the family. They hear them all. I've mentioned the history of the Ninth, so I'll stay away from that. This is a constitutional curiosity, this election, in the sense that you have these various other justices who are remaining, have been there, I'm going to say 12 years, each of them, and all of a sudden, whether it's me or somebody else, here comes a new boss who's going to tell you what to do, at least administratively. So the things that, nuts and bolts, outside of how you're going to rule and all that information, we got to deal with the Chief Justice is going to have to handle all the administrative duties of the court as well. And I talked about it earlier as far as what am I going to do, and I can tell you, I burn the hours. That's you're not going to have to worry about that with me. In addition to that, I've got the management experience that would allow me to do the job, as I mentioned earlier. I don't think I did mention, but I served as a managing partner of my firm. Where are we going to order the pens? What's the coffee service going to be? And trust me, I can squeeze a penny. And I'm sure it came across on my questionnaire, is I have an obsession with government waste of 1 time and 2 money. And when you see it on a day-to-day basis, I know that's something that concerns y'all, but it's, once again, when you see it day-to-day, it's scary. The things I would do to change, I wish I could pound the table and talk about all the great changes that we're going to make, but in this particular court, I think the best answer for many candidates is we're going to stay the course because things are going well. There's going to be things once I get in there that little things make things more efficient, because I think we all do it in our daily life. That why are we doing it that way? Well, because we always did it that way. And with the new fresh voice in there, I think there's going to be several things that we can do. I talked a lot about the docket equalization order. I hope that didn't get too deep and dry. But yeah, I'll finish up. I think the 2 things you're looking for is One is from a chief justice is administrative abilities, and I've got those in spades. And secondly, a person that you can trust to be conservative. I don't mean conservative in the political sense, I mean conservative in the judicial sense, in that we're gonna get things done, we're gonna move cases quickly, and we're not going to legislate. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it. Good luck on your campaign.